Okay, great. Recording to the cloud. Karen, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you, everybody, for attending this research conversation this evening featuring award winners. I'm sure we'll learn quite a lot from them. Briefly, I'd like to give my respects to First Nations, past, present and emerging, across the various lands on Australia and New Zealand where we are attending from today. Some brief housekeeping. Please keep your microphone on mute. If you have questions, please put them on the chat and we can pose your questions to the panelists. So let's introduce our panelists then. Got a great pleasure introducing them. Thank you all for agreeing to talk about your research journey. First up, we have Jenna Dean, a research radiation therapist who received the Varian Award at the 2025 ASMIRT Conference. Evening, Jenna. Then we have with us Kristie Sweeney, radiographer and sonographer, who was awarded Western Sydney Health Department's 2024 Excellence in Allied Health Researcher of the Year Award. Evening, Kristie. And
Hi, everybody.
Last but not least, we've got Michelle Fenech, sonographer and educator, who was awarded the ASAR Researcher of the Year Award this year. Evening. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Karen. Hi, everyone.
Okay, I'll start off with a couple of questions then. Hey, let's see where we go. First off, how did you get interested in or start your research journey? Who wants to start off with that one?
I can pick that one up if you like. Mine was sort of offered to me on a bit of on a platter, really. Western New South Wales Local Health District had several sonographers suffer either career-ending injuries or changing injuries. So sonographers had gone back to radiography because they'd hurt themselves. And so they wanted someone to do some research. So the general manager at the time asked Jill Clark, who's on the meeting here today, and a couple of other academics from Sydney Uni to come and talk to the district about further research in the area. And I hadn't really considered doing any research, but it appealed to me. So I just sort of thought about it for a while. I thought, can I fit it in my life? Probably yes, probably not, but yes, let's do it. And signed up for it. So that was how I started. It was fortuitous, I guess, more than anything else.
An interesting way to get into research. How about you, Jenna and Michelle?
Yeah, I'm happy to add to that. I guess my experience was a little bit different. I'm someone who likes to understand how things work, and I ask a lot of questions. So in terms of finding my feet in the workforce, finding my feet in radiotherapy, observing, seeing how things are done, and then looking for opportunities to change how we do them or why or what we might learn from that process. So it was more a curiosity and working out how to change those practices or what those opportunities were.
Yeah, and mine was different again, I think. I was a sonographer and I was working as a civilian, but in the Department of Defence. And so I saw a certain cohort of patients that were all had a similar condition, I suppose. And so started off just doing a master's by research through there. And yeah, I think it was, once again, being curious, but having that certain subset of a population that was easy to investigate, I suppose.
It's really interesting. 3 quite different start points for your research journey. So can you think of any significant challenges or hurdles to your research and how you managed to overcome this? Michelle, you look like you're desperate to talk about this.
I think I had every sort of challenge thrown at me. And I think when you start any of these things, I naively thought, oh, I won't have any of those challenges. I've heard people talk about all of that, but there were all sorts of things. Well, I'd started my PhD when I was at the Department of Defence. But having ethical approval through there required me to stay working as a healthcare professional there, and I just had a contract. And then Department of Defence decided to outsource all of its imaging instead of having a direct contract. we had to tender for our contracts, and I was competing against Bupa and Medibank Private for national contracts. That wasn't going to happen. So I lost my position there. It no longer happened. And when I lost that, I was halfway through my PhD and I lost all my ethical approval, all of my work. And I had to sort of pull out and then start a new one. So I think it's certainly, yeah, just when you don't think things will happen to you, karma has a very interesting way of teaching you a lesson.
Well, you've certainly got a challenge and a half there, Michelle. Kristie, Jenna?
I think research itself is quite the roller coaster. There's, you know, peaks and troughs, and some of the troughs I identified also related to ethics. More specifically, probably the SSA, trying to, there's so many different processes within, well, certainly New South Wales Health for different LHDs, and that was tricky to manage. Rejection or not even rejection, resubmission of a paper that you have poured your heart and soul in. You think, why don't you like it? And it's always reviewer 2 who asks the hard questions. I just want to say, if you're reviewer 2, stop that. And for mine, I had a trial, a randomized control trial where recruitment and retention were incredibly challenging and did bring me to tears several times. But I don't know, I think that the peaks definitely make up for those troughs. So you just poke along.
Yeah, I think some of it also comes down to, depending on how you're doing your research. If you are working within a team, sometimes it can be really challenging to give those responsibilities to other people. And sometimes like things go missing, following up and working around consent forms or things like that can also be a big challenge. And or, you know, getting 3/4 of the way into something and finding out that someone's deviated from the protocol, and how do you recover from that? How do you come back? I think also just not knowing what you don't know. So finding a mentor, getting someone who can guide you and support you through the process, because I think you sort of, I don't know, particularly early on in your research journey, I think you tend to form what you think the outcome is going to be, and then you ask a question and shape it and do your research to get that answer. And sometimes well, most of the time, that's not the best way to approach it. So having someone who can work through the process with you and guide you, I think was something that I found particularly helpful in that process as well.
That's
Yeah,
interesting when you say you wanted a mentor. Michelle, carry on, sorry.
No, I think what Kristie was saying about the writing up the research and well, if you haven't had rejections, that's lucky. I certainly have had a lot of rejections for different things that I've done. And I think coming from, sometimes we fear rejection, and I found the first rejection I got was very liberating. And then I went, oh, it wasn't that bad. What do I have to fear? I just keep trying. I just improve it. And sometimes I think our fear of not doing it perfectly can hold us back. And I think to anyone that's getting into research, don't fear that everyone will come across it. And it's just part of the learning journey.
That's really good insight. That's very good insight. Thank you, everybody. To get maybe a little bit more broader in the questions, really, how do you approach your research, and how do you go about supporting others that are perhaps much earlier on in their research journey than you are?
Maybe I can start, because I'm probably in a simpler position that actually really supports this question. So in my current role at work, I am our research radiation therapist. So my scope is to actually do some of my own research, but also to build the skills and capacity and just knowledge, and hopefully increase participation in research amongst the radiotherapy team. So it's those sorts of spots of being available to ask questions, maybe asking questions yourself when you see someone pique an interest in something, sort of encourage them to explore what the opportunities are within that, ask people about things that perhaps they would like to see done differently, or look into things that maybe irritate them in their day-to-day, because there's nothing like driving, you know, if something irritates you, you can drive people to get behind a change and investigate and look into it. But yeah, I think it's paying it forward a little bit in a way, because I've been so fortunate that so many people have been kind enough to invest their time and effort and share their knowledge and support me in my process, that I think it's only fair that you do pass that forward, or bring other people in when you're doing a project is another great way to do that. Bring someone more junior that's interested and wants to understand, but also sharing what you learn. Because I think if people, particularly within our profession, can see us getting out there, doing research, producing these great papers, doing things and sharing results, then it does show people that it's possible and that they could do it too, which I think is a great enabler. It's not this big thing up here that's really hard that only professors can do. There's people just like everybody else within it and can get involved.
I think it's good to share your journey with some people that are interested as well. It took me 6 months to figure out what the difference between a literature review and a systematic review was. And no matter how many times someone explained to me, I'd be like, I don't know. And I had a great team of supervisors, and I think you're right, paying it forward and hoping to be that for somebody else down the track is certainly a goal of mine. But surrounding yourself with, supportive people is important, I think. And where you find that, you might have that within your peer group or your family, or just, where you're doing your research, but you tend to seek out the people who will be helpful and supportive. And I got offered a lot of opportunity to share things by my supervisors, like ongoing. So once I'd tackled a systematic review and knew what they were, that was important. Somebody that would be supervising somebody else and say, oh, email Kristie. And I took great joy in being able to share stuff that I'd learned, because I think that's really important.
I think it's important that if someone's wanting to get into research and we're supporting them, we've got to make sure that they enjoy it and they don't hate it. And so they have to have be guided to have a topic that they are interested in. It's their passion, not someone else's, because you can get roped into doing that. And it's, there is a bit of input, but you've got to see the benefit you get back from it as well and feel that. And I think being part of a team and having people to discuss things with is important, because trying to tread your own way can be it's hard to navigate, and there's so many things. And like Kristie said, there's terms and it's like another language in there. And often as a clinician and someone in a clinical job doing research, it's hard to separate what you do in your job as to putting on a clinical hat and then a research hat, because there's different ways of thinking of things, and that takes a while to develop. It's not instantaneous. It does take a while.
So I think what I'm hearing from all three of you is the importance of teamwork and collaboration and support. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for that. I'll just remind all our viewers that if you do have any questions, please do put them into the chat, and if we've got time, we'll deal with them. But moving on from how you research and how you support others, can you think a little bit about how it's one thing researching, and that some people think all people do is research and what's the point of it? But how do you translate your research out into the real world, and what's the impact of your research, do you think?
Well, I think with any research, one of the big questions to ask is, what's your so what factor? What's the reason you're doing this, and what impact is it going to have? How is someone going to care about this? And is it going to change things? Is it going to change patient management? Is it going to change if it's a clinical thing, patient outcomes? And ultimately, I think you've got to think of how are you going to sell it to someone. It's not only you've got to be a marketer, a marketing tool for your own research. How are you going to actually sell this, that it's worth investing all this time and effort into, so that it's got to have some sellability and some impact.
It was the elevator pitch, isn't it? You have to be able to sell it and why you're interested, and have that one fact that people go, I actually can't believe that. And sometimes it can take a little while to identify that, but And then, you know, sometimes the rest of your research to people is like giving them toothpicks for their eyelids. But if you can identify that one thing that people are going to go, wow, about, I think that's probably something to identify early on so you can share your interests.
I think the big part of that is as well is actually making sure you share what you learn. Like a lot of people do the research and they might even get to the point where they implement it within the department, but that's as far as it goes. I think when we do things, even if we maybe learn something that we didn't necessarily want to learn or it didn't go to plan, again, there's some value in sharing that. I certainly had projects where I had my heart set on this beautiful, shiny carbon fiber immobilization equipment, and I was determined to prove that it was so much better than the other options that we had in our department, and we compared 3 of them. And I did find that the immobilization device actually didn't matter at all, but if the patient had a busting bladder, they would tilt their pelvis. And I think being able to look at all of the information that's in front of you and be like, oh, I didn't get the answer I expected, but what else can I learn from this? And again, be able to share that and use that in a productive way, I think adds a lot of value to what we're doing there.
So would you say being flexible and contextualizing your research, would that sum up what you're saying?
Definitely.
Really don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, but I think that is it. And yeah, just again, like the impact does come down to
Excellent.
whether you can show a benefit to your efficiency or your patients. And that's probably the most important part.
And I think conferences and sharing and publications, not even conferences, they're like my favorite thing because it regenerates your interest in what you're doing. You know, maybe not for long, but it does give you that perk for a few weeks, I think. And it's conferences, I think, are the best way to share your information because your target audience is right in front of you.
And another thing, I think, when you're sort of trying to translate your research and show the impact of it, is one thing I had to learn was that we are not just telling the research, we nearly have to be storytellers. And I was getting a bit off track with some of my papers, and I had to collaborate with a storyteller, someone from like the education and the arts, and come in and add a narrative that puts the research into more simple terms and makes it more digestible and that sort of thing, because there's no use having all this hoity-toity language that no one's actually going to understand, because then no one's going to read it and no one's going to implement it. But if you make it more tangible for the audience that you're targeting and have some sort of story that is linkable to the reader, that really helps, and that really makes doing the research worthwhile because you can communicate it easily.
Very interesting, thank you. Now you've all come to research from different perspectives, really, but all sort of clinical as well as academic. What do you think about the different pathways into research, whether it's clinical versus academic pathway into research? What are your thoughts on that? Anything?
I suppose it depends on where you are, in what position you're in, and what you might have access to doing in terms of research. Do you mean just doing some research for research, but not linking it to a research high degree? Is that what your question is, Karen?
I think that's important because a lot of people do assume if you're doing research, it's only PhD. That's the only reason you do research, isn't it? But I think there are so many projects that could be done that aren't. So many words. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right. And doing like even then they're not simple, but audits and things that you don't need ethics applications for, that you just need hospital permission to do. They're a really valuable source of information, and yeah, so I don't think you definitely don't need to tie it to a degree or anything. If you just have a thirst for information or there's a question you need answered, most places you'll be able to find someone to help you, I think. And again, it comes back to that whole question of surrounding yourself with, you know, supportive people and people who know what they're doing. And if you don't know who it is, I don't know the way to find it, but I'm pretty sure there'll be someone around that could help you. I find a librarian usually very helpful, actually.
Yeah, I think an audit is a great way of people getting into research. And often people that have started doing an audit go, oh, this is bigger than I need to. They quite enjoy finding their initial findings and realize that that snowballs and adds to something else. And they end up getting into research that way. And it can just be looking at something small. You know, it doesn't have to be a massive study. You might just want to do a tiny little pilot study and investigate something, whether it's worth doing some research into. And it might not even be a clinical thing. I mean, if there's someone in academia, it might be about teaching or learning and how you're training and how you're supervising someone. So it might not be just you know, something that's impacting into interactions with patients. You know, it might be on the other side of things. And there's all sorts of little questions. Wherever you have a question and a curiosity, it often needs to be nutted out with other people, and nutting it out can come through and realize, oh, this is actually a small little research project that might be worth, you know, following up or doing, and then sharing the results at some point, either a conference or something else.
This is really interesting. I think what I'm gathering as a theme for this evening is curiosity, storytelling, collaboration and support. That's what I'm hearing a lot of this evening, which is really, really interesting. So what next for your research career? Where do you see it going?
I am working towards finishing my PhD, so I guess that's my next obvious step, but also looking for ways to increase the research participation for the RTs in our department, but also trying to set up some collaborative RT-led research. I think there's a lot of research within the radiotherapy space, and certainly across the medical radiation professions, but a lot of the time it's led by your sort of like your radiation oncologists or your radiologists or someone outside of that, where they can do something that's big and interventional. And I think particularly from a patient-facing perspective and the ability to improve their perception of their care or their experience of care, RTs are really well placed on the front line, or MRPs in general are really well placed to be able to lead and conduct and collaborate on that sort of research, because depending on how broad or how niche your particular topic is, like it's a really great way to kind of accelerate that process. You can run them in parallel. Like there's a whole heap of different ways you can do it that navigate the challenges of ethics across multiple sites and things like that. But yeah, being able to, I think, have that involvement, ask those questions, learn something, and then turn that into something that impacts how the patient's cared for or how we do what we do, I think is a really nice space. So that's definitely where I plan to put my energy next.
Yeah, I agree, Jenna. Building capacity in our professions will only improve the standing of our professions, improve the benefits to our patients, and improve the future professions that we train. And I think MRP-led research is necessary. And so building capacity in others is something I'm highly invested in, and building capacity in our professions and professions wide. Because then that just generates more enthusiasm for research, and it has a snowballing effect.
For me, I finished my PhD last year and said I was never going to use it again. Threw the toys out of the cot a bit about not doing anything more and just watching some television for 6 months, and then managed to get myself involved in a research study at our hospital. Western New South Wales, I think, has the first mobile CT truck, and we send it out to places like Walgett, you know, quite remote places. And they wanted to do an evaluation of that, and I got invited onto that team. So that sort of, I was like, oh, maybe I am a bit more interested in other topics than what I thought I was. And then we also got a opportunity to do some AI investigation on chest x-rays. And so I decided that was going to be my new topic. So I think one of the great things about that is that I still have a bit of a hunger for research, but also it's not sticking down the same line as what I did. Like you find a question and you just sort of think I'm going to answer that. And so that has fired my enthusiasm. And the Netflix is not quite so prevalent in life anymore. There's a bit more reading of things and writing a few more ethics proposals. So you should never say you're not going to use it, because if you get, it's interesting. It's another string, I guess, to your bow. And I thought I was never going to fire an arrow out of that bow again, but here we are.
Never say never, hey, Kristie? Got a couple of questions come through the chat. Linnell's asking, what was your process in finding what works with regard to your day-to-day job and research?
I'll go first. I finished my PhD probably 5 years ago, but I work at a university. But where I work at a university, you're sort of given different academic profiles. So you can either be a teacher or a balanced person or a researcher, and I sit more in the teacher space. So I'm a teaching scholar. And I think it was about 2 years after I finished my PhD. I hadn't really done too many papers. I'd just spent so much time teaching, and I did an early career researcher program at our university, which had to allow me to change my mindset to allow more time for research and think of myself a bit as a researcher, not just so much a teacher, and set a bit of a goal of what was I going to do, and was I just going to be known just as what I did my PhD on, or was I going to expand? And so I had to sort of think that I needed to look at other things, like what you were saying, Kristie, like don't just get caught in your one thing that you did your research on. You, as a researcher, you've got to expand and look and collaborate widely. And then by collaborating with other people, they give you ideas. And I think the other thing you have to do is not just work with people in your local neighborhood, but go nationally and go internationally. So go big, and then you're going to get bigger ideas. And so you've got to sort of initiate those as well. You can't just sit back and wait for people to contact you. You've got to go and talk to people and ask people as well. And so you've got to drive a lot of it, and you've got to set your mindset to say, okay, I'm going to drive this and change the way I behave. And I had to have a big mindset shift around that.
I think I'm at the opposite end of the spectrum. I work clinically full-time, but I am well supported. My kids were 8 and 11 when I started my PhD, and I took every month bar one of that 8 years to finish it, and that is okay. You just have to set your boundaries and what time you can, I guess, give to research outside of your normal job and your family life. And I think if you know in advance what you can do, and I was really lucky, I don't think I cooked dinner for 8 years. My husband cooked every night. Yeah, I know. And now I feel like the need to take it up a bit again, which is a little unfortunate. But yeah, I think set your boundaries early, know what you can commit to, because it can be big. But if you know what you can do, then I think that's the way you sort of can manage it. I'm at a good place now. My kids one's finished school, one's at school, and my husband still does a lot of cooking. So I have time for side hustles.
I think some really great advice there. Thank you. Now, Helen has said, Jenna, you've sort of touched on this, but I'm wanting to know how you are going with building the research culture in your department, and do you have any tips on doing so?
Oh gosh, there's a lot in there. For the moment, my role's actually, I'd still call it relatively new. It didn't exist before I was in the position. So finding my way, shaping the role, working out how to best work with the rest of the team. So for the moment, I'm working more on finding out what they perceive they need and what would be beneficial and what would be helpful, setting up resources, actually talking to other people who are in similar roles in different spots in allied health. Like, I'm very fortunate at my workplace that they do have similar roles in other allied health spots. I've been talking to the dietetics team, I've been talking to the guys in OT, some of the physios, and finding out what they've implemented that's been really useful within their team to increase their capacity, their skill building and things like that. The initial advice on that was actually running improving the consumption of research amongst the team. So getting involved in journal clubs, setting that up, showing people how to do them, guiding them through the process, making that something that becomes a bit routine and sort of the norm, so that people are willing to pick up a paper, have a look at it, understand the processes behind it, how we might be able to apply something similar. So it's more about being a support, providing encouragement, showing people what's possible. I've also taken a position on the ethics committee at our hospital. So in terms of navigating ethics, that's been really helpful because I've got a much better understanding of what some of the flags are that might come up, some of the wording that makes things a little bit less resistant and things like that. Like, again, it's not always works because it depends on who's reviewing it on the day, but certainly some of those things that you can be really mindful of in enabling people in that process and not getting some of that feedback. I think, yeah, otherwise it is something that just keeps going. And I do have days where I'm just like, why do I even bother? Nobody hears me. I may as well not. But I am going to persist with it because I do think that we are really well placed to make a difference and have that positive impact. So if I can find ways to keep telling that story to everybody as part of what we're doing, then I think that will really help. So it's a to be advised or stay tuned. And if I find things that work, I promise I will share them.
Sounds good. Any other tips from Kristie or Michelle on building research culture?
I think Jenna's point of even collaborating with people in other disciplines, we can often sit in our little MRP silo to a degree, and then when we start collaborating with other disciplines, you can see how the impact of what we can do can go across, you know, like with speech therapy, occupational therapy, like there's so many different allied health disciplines or, you know, medicine or nursing that we can collaborate with. And, you know, they might have more of a problem that we can solve from our professions as well. And so that can also help drive and help solve problems in a multidisciplinary manner, not just we're doing something for MRPs.
And I think for me, we're lucky enough to have a rural health school associated with our hospital for one of the universities. So I have like a good in to chat to academics that because I thought Jill was going to be my person forever, and I found more people, so that's really good.
That's good to hear. Peter said, I love the narrative and storytelling requirement for increasing research impact. How did you personally develop this skill? It's definitely been a theme this evening.
I'm still working on that one, Peter. That's why I collaborate with a storyteller who does autoethnography and collaborative autoethnography. I was a quantitative researcher, like very science-based, and then had to try and sell this boring stuff to and make it, I don't know, more interesting. And then I started dabbling in some qualitative research, but yeah, I'm collaborating and I'm still learning how to do the storytelling, but often I find just having to tell this storyteller what I've done, and then they just sort of say it back to me. I'm like, oh, that is the story. Like it's in our head, but we have to say it out loud and clear the story and clarify it for ourselves. And it's often someone that doesn't know anything about what we're talking about. And like you said before, Karen, giving context and putting the research into context in a very basic manner helps with the storytelling as well.
Can I add a beginner's suggestion in that space? Recently did a workshop on sharing your research and the narrative. And one of their hot tips, particularly for the abstract sort of content or context, is to look at a structure that goes and, but, therefore. So it's this is a problem and this is a consideration in this fact. And this is currently what the process is. But this, you know, is where we need to look at it. Therefore, if we implement this, we can get X, X, and X. So it sort of builds a thing that it's like, oh, this is the problem, and this is why it's a big problem, and this is how people have looked to solve it before, but there's an opportunity here where we could look at this, and that's why we really need to research this particular aspect. So it may not work for all of the contexts, but it's a really nice, simple starting point that can kind of help people navigate that space and build the impact in your elevator pitch.
And I think, like everything, practice and copying. So if you've been to a conference and someone gives you a really interesting presentation, and it might be just the way they present, you know, I always think thievery and copying is a bit of a, you know, it's a compliment to somebody, isn't it, really? So, and I make my team sit through all my presentations. I usually give it to them first, just so that they could give me some feedback and go, that was really boring, don't say that. You know, I'm good with constructive criticism.
Questions are coming in. A different Peter has said, Michelle's comment about multidisciplinary work made me consider this question. As radiography grounded academics, we often research a modality that is clinically linked to X-ray with CT or MRI or CT PET, etc. Is ultrasound research limited as a more unique modality, or are there multimodality ultrasound research avenues available?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely multimodality research. I think we need more of it, really, because even in medical imaging, we sit in our silos to a degree, and we definitely need you know, things where we're comparing imaging modalities and proper research. Like a lot of what we say with when we compare imaging modalities is anecdotal, like, and we don't compare them enough. So I definitely think that we need more in there. And it's not that we're competing with one another. We're often complementary, as we know, and just being able to show the positives of all of the, and justify to the, you know, patients why they often need so many different types of imaging done. And often it's when you go out to another discipline and they talk about what they look at, it gives you some sort of perspective back on how we need to do some research and why we need to do it and compare those modalities.
And it probably depends a little bit on what your research is. I know that just speaking from experience, mine was about pain whilst doing the same job over and over again, which didn't just apply to sonographers. So I had an abstract accepted for a physiotherapy conference because they suffer similar injuries. So I guess that, you know, the world's really your oyster. You just have to figure out how you can apply your research to other areas. But yeah, that's a really good question.
Jenna, I love your comment that borrowing from many is research. I think I might have to embroider that somewhere.
It's true though, right? So you do your lit review, you learn from what others have learned, and then you build on that. So yeah, it was more just specifically in relation to Kristie's comment about copying presentation or learning from others and using that in your next presentation. But yeah, I think if you pick all of the best ideas from lots of people, then you've done your research and you're a better researcher.
No, love it. I'm never going to argue with that. Another question. Did you require funding support to run your program of research? If so, what was the source?
Well, when I did my PhD, I didn't get funding. When I did my master's, I didn't get funding. And I've only been, I would say, brave enough to apply for funding in the last couple of years. I think, you know, when you do research, and even once you're qualified with your, like, you know, as a researcher to a certain level, you still have this imposter syndrome that, oh, I'm not good enough to do this. And it's quite like, I suppose, the fear of rejection again, putting forward an application to say, I want to ask for funding, and then the fear of getting rejected. But you've just got to apply for funding. And often you need that funding to maybe recruit participants or incentivize participants. You know, some research just can't run on nothing. So I've applied through professional bodies, through different universities, through different public hospital sector funding opportunities. Once you start looking out there for different areas of funding, you can start to find them. And then it's learning how to craft a grant application. But since trying, I have been successful, and I'm starting to use that to use other researchers, other MRP researchers, to fund them to do research with me.
And I think perseverance again there as well. I applied 3 times for an ASA grant and was eventually successful, and it made my education much better with a designer than my dodgy old PowerPoint was going to be. So it's important to keep at it, I think.
And I think it's also just being aware of and open to opportunities. So I'm currently funded for my research 2 days a week through a clinical fellowship with breast cancer trials, which is something that I would have looked at initially and gone, no, I can't compete with this. I'm not going to even have a crack, but was encouraged to apply. And again, they're sort of looking at a breadth of scope across researchers. So if you've got a question that's worth answering, or, you can sell them why your question is worth answering. The opportunities for support there. And again, professional bodies like ASMIRT provides grants for MRPs for both novice and slightly more experienced researchers. I think getting some of those smaller ones under your belt as well helps with building that confidence, building that knowledge around what maybe works well, what doesn't. Building your team, I think, is an important part of applying for funding. So if you can talk about the fact that you've got the experience, but you've also got the right experience in your team, but you're also bringing along some other people to learn, that can be seen quite well. Consumer involvement, I think, is another one that's really helpful when it comes to funding as well. So having that person who can help you explain your research in lay terms, or you can sanity check it with them, but actually having them have meaningful involvement will impact the outcome, is seen favourably by people that are doing grants. So having that as part of it as well, I think, is a really another useful aspect to where that funding can come into it. And it definitely, if you can get that funding, whether it is to provide statistics support or protected time to do your research or to make your PowerPoints and make your point come across well, or even just the cost of publishing, things like that, it can really help. But the more you build your portfolio, that you've then got the capacity and the track record to apply for bigger grants.
Yes, good point. Very good point. I've really enjoyed this evening. Have any of you got any last top tips or words of encouragement for people that might be wanting to get into research before we allow you to escape us?
I would say don't be scared and don't let it hold back that if you think you're not good enough to do it or you don't have the capacity to do it. You're always learning with research, and there's I think, like we've all said, you learn along the way, and when you start research, you're not expected to know what an experienced researcher knows, and experienced researchers are still learning. So, and the way research is done keeps, changing slightly as well. Don't think that, you're not suitable to it, or, don't be scared of it, and reach out and find people that have probably been successful in it to use as mentors, and get mentors that have done research, not said they've done research and not produce some outcomes. You actually want mentors that can guide you to get it done and get it finished, and then have some outputs and things like that, and help you get it done in a timely manner and not go on and on and on. So those people that you seek mentorship from, you need to be available to you, not just like some mystical person that might talk to you once every 2 months or something. You need to see them a little bit more regularly.
Yeah, I think just, give it a go. Like, it's and we've talked a little bit tonight about the challenges or the troughs of research, and we probably didn't mention the peaks enough, because they are inspiring, when you get a paper published or you submit your PhD and now you get to do it online and you have to do it with champagne. It's all of that stuff makes the challenges and the hardships really worthwhile. So if you've got a burning question that you need answered, just give it a go. Find your people, and that might be through a professional body like the ASA has a research group. Reach out to your hospital. More than happy to take emails to see, you know, if I can help, and very potentially I can't, but I could probably point you in the right direction for a start. So I would say just go for it.
Yeah, much the same. I think find your people, build your network, and just ask questions and see what you learn. But I think the connection that I have found within research is one of the things that I really appreciate the most about it, that you can have a conversation with someone and it might be something really small, but then they go and talk about something, and the next time you see them, you've got something else to talk about, but you can share it or work out how you can apply it differently. But definitely find your people and yeah, ask the question, see what happens.
And if you are interested in doing like a research higher degree, if it's like a master's by research or a PhD and you're domestic in Australia, it's Commonwealth supported. So it's not an outlay of money. It might be an outlay of time, but you might not be paying university fees. So don't let the economic burden or cost of it be a barrier either, because that can be a barrier for quite a few people as well.
Yes, that's what the wise words there, Michelle. Thank you so much, Michelle, Kristie, Jenna. You've given your time up to us. You've given some expertise and curiosity, narrative, teamwork and collaboration is what and give it a go is what mostly I've got from this. Thank you for your time, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm hoping that this is being recorded. I'm sure we'll be putting it up onto the website as soon as we possibly can. But thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone, for a great discussion.
Good night.
Thanks for the great questions. Good night.